The pig outside is more useful than you.
Mama Chica's voice rang out above the laughter and the clatter of dishes during the largest family gathering they had had since the beginning of the year. She did not lower her voice, nor did she intend the comment for anyone in particular. She wanted everyone to hear it. She wanted the cousins sitting around the long table to hear it. She wanted the neighbors who had just been invited over for dinner to hear it. And most of all, she wanted Gozi to hear it clearly. Gozi stood beside the kitchen door holding a tray, feeling as though the entire room had turned to look at her at once. A few people laughed automatically. A few others pretended not to hear. But no one spoke up. No one said the remark had gone too far. No one said that a woman who had been a daughter-in-law for many years did not deserve to be treated that way. Even those who felt uncomfortable simply lowered their heads and looked at their plates. In families like that, silence was often easier than standing up for what was right. Outside in the yard, the pig Mama Chica had just mentioned stood with its head down, eating from a trough filled with scraps of meat, vegetables, and freshly cooked food. Meanwhile, Gozi's meal was nothing more than a bowl of watery gari that had been left in the corner of the kitchen since the afternoon. The contrast was so obvious that no explanation was needed. A young woman sitting near the window noticed it and frowned slightly before asking in a half-joking voice,
Isn't she eaten with everyone?
Mama Chica laughed loudly as though she had just heard a very amusing story.
Eat with everyone? Someone who does not earn a single coin can eat whatever she is given. Do not worry about her. She is used to it.
Laughter echoed through the room again. Not as loudly as before, but enough for Ngozi to know that no one in that room was truly on her side. The most painful part was not her mother-in-law's words. The most painful part was the man sitting at the center of the dining table. Emeka heard every word. He saw the look in his wife's eyes. He saw the bowl that had been set aside in the kitchen. He saw his mother pointing towards the pig outside, as though she were comparing two things of different value. He saw everything, but he said nothing. Not because he had not heard, not because he did not understand what was happening. He simply chose silence, and sometimes the silence of the person you love cuts deeper than any insult. People often think betrayal means infidelity, lies, or leaving for someone else, but there are quieter forms of betrayal. It is when someone watches the person they once promised to protect being hurt and never opens their mouth. It is when someone knows what is wrong, but allows it to continue for the sake of their own comfort. Ngozi had understood that for a long time, perhaps too long. That was why, when her eyes met Emeka's at the far end of the table, she was no longer looking for help. She simply looked at him for a few seconds and then looked away. There was no hope left in her eyes, and when hope disappears from a marriage, what remains is often nothing more than habit. The party continued as though nothing had happened. Conversations about money, children, and work once again filled the room. Mama Chica continued chatting and laughing with the guests. Emeka continued eating. Everyone else continued enjoying their evening. Only Gozi quietly returned to the back kitchen. She sat down on an old plastic chair beside the sink and stared at the bowl of cold gari in front of her. No one followed her. No one asked if she was okay. No one felt the need to do so. After many years of living in that house, everyone had become accustomed to Gozi enduring everything. They took her silence for granted. Just as they expected a light to turn on when a switch was pressed, or water to flow when a tap was opened. What they did not know was that her silence did not come from weakness. It came from somewhere else, somewhere much deeper. That night, after the last guests had gone home and the entire house had fallen silent, Gozi finally walked into her small room. Emeka had not come upstairs yet. He was sitting outside on the veranda talking with his mother. Perhaps they were discussing the bills that needed to be paid next month. Perhaps they were talking about repairing the roof or perhaps they were discussing something else entirely. The only thing that was certain was that they were not talking about what had happened to Gozi at the dinner party tonight. Gozi closed the bedroom door. She sat down on the edge of the bed. For a very long time, she did nothing. She simply stared into the empty space in front of her. Anyone who has ever experienced being disrespected in their own home will understand that moment. It is the moment when pain no longer comes in the form of tears. It becomes something heavier, something quieter, and something far more dangerous. Finally, she leaned forward and opened the bottom drawer of the old cabinet. From inside it, she took out a worn notebook. There was nothing special about it. The cover had faded. Several pages inside had turned slightly yellow with age. If someone happened to see it, they would think it was nothing more than an ordinary notebook, the kind any woman might use to write down recipes, shopping lists, or daily tasks. Gozi opened the notebook. Her eyes stopped on the last few pages. She picked up a pen, then added a new line. No one saw what she wrote. No one knew what those words meant. No one knew why. Every time she was hurt, she turned to that notebook. The only thing anyone could have seen was the strange calmness on her face after she finished writing. It was not the face of someone who had just been defeated. Nor was it the face of someone planning revenge. It looked like the face of someone waiting for something, waiting long enough, waiting until the truth spoke for itself. Outside on the veranda, Mama Chica's laughter still drifted through the night breeze. She had no idea that the daughter-in-law she looked down on the most was keeping a secret that could change everything. Emeka did not know either. The relatives who had laughed along with the insult earlier that evening did not know. None of them realized that what had happened at the party today was not an ordinary moment. It was only the final small stone placed on a scale that had already been full for a very long time. And when a scale leans too long to one side, sooner or later it finds its balance again. Gozi closed the notebook, placed it back in the drawer, and turned off the light. The room sank into darkness. The house slowly drifted into sleep as well. Everything appeared normal, just like every other day, but sometimes the greatest changes begin with the most ordinary things. A sentence, a silence, a wound no one can see, or an old notebook hidden inside the drawer of a woman who has grown far too accustomed to being looked down upon. No one in that house knew that notebook would change the fate of the entire family. In the years that followed, Gozi gradually came to understand that in Mama Chica's house, a daughter-in-law did not have to do anything wrong to be considered a burden. All she had to do was not be the woman her mother-in-law had chosen. She lived in the small room at the end of the hallway, the hottest room during the dry season and the dampest whenever it rained, where the window had been stuck for years, but no one saw any reason to repair it because it was only her room. Every morning, Gozi woke before sunrise. Lit the stove, boiled water, swept the yard, washed the pots, prepared breakfast for the family, and only afterward ate whatever was left, if the food tasted good. Mama Chica said it was because she had taught her daughter-in-law how to work properly. If the food lacked flavor, she slammed her spoon down and said, "You can't even cook a proper pot of soup. I don't understand why my son married you." Emeka usually sat there listening to those words fall onto the breakfast table like small stones and quietly continued eating. At first, Gozi would look at her husband, hoping he would say just one small thing, that she had been awake since 4 in the morning, that she had done all the work no one saw, that a woman could not always be blamed for things she had already tried her hardest to do well. But time taught her that searching for protection only hurts more when the person you look to always chooses to turn away. Mama Chica did not limit her contempt for Gozi to the house. She carried that contempt to the front veranda, to the water well, to the market, to church, and to anywhere people were willing to listen to the neighbors. She often sighed like an unfortunate mother. I raised Emeka to become a good man, and yet he ended up marrying a wife who is no help at all. My son still carries this entire family. The women in the neighborhood would shake their heads sympathetically because they only saw Emeka leaving for work each morning in clean clothes. Saw Mama Chika sitting on the veranda complaining, and saw Ngozi quietly carrying baskets, washing clothes and fetching water. No one asked why the woman called useless was the busiest person in the house. No one asked why her hands were always cracked from soap, hot water, flour and charcoal. In their eyes, the story had already been told by Mama Chika. And when a story is repeated enough times by the loudest person, the silent one often becomes the guilty one. One day, while Ngozi was hanging laundry outside, a neighbor named Iber leaned over the fence and quietly asked, "Aren't you planning to have a child? A woman who stays in her husband's house too long without something to prove herself usually has a difficult life." Ngozi froze for a moment. The wet shirt in her hands suddenly felt heavier than before. She knew the question was not really born from concern. It was a blade wrapped in a gentle voice. Before Ngozi could answer, Mama Chika stepped out of the house and laughed softly. "Have a child. First she should learn how to be a proper wife. What's the point of bringing another mouth to feed into this house when all she does is eat her husband's food?" Ebe forced a smile and walked away. But the words remained in the yard for a long time. They clung to the clothesline, the basin of water, and Ngozi's shoulders as she bent down to pick up a towel that had fallen. From that day on, whenever she walked through the market, she could feel familiar eyes looking at her with a mixture of pity and judgment. They knew nothing about her, but they believed they knew enough. They believed Mama Chika. They believed Emeka. They believed Ngozi's silence was proof that every accusation was true. What they did not know was that behind that silence was a life being drained away little by little. During the day, Ngozi worked in her husband's home like someone who had no right to be tired. At night, after everyone had gone to sleep, she sat at the small table in her room, repairing clothes, sewing buttons, making dresses, and packaging chin-chin snacks to send to the market through a young woman who sold them on her behalf. Some nights, the needle pierced her fingertips until they bled. She would simply place the injured finger in her mouth for a moment and continue working, because the order had to be delivered the next morning, and the electricity bill was due by the weekend. Some mornings before dawn, while everyone else slept, she quietly counted small bills and divided them into different piles, one for rice, one for medicine for Mama Chika, and one to transfer into Emeka's account, because he said his account was more convenient for paying household bills. "Just let me keep it. It's easier that way." Emeka had told her during their first year of marriage, when Ngozi had begun earning small amounts of money from baking. "Besides, people should see that I'm the one providing for the family." Back then, Ngozi still believed husband and wife were one. She thought it did not matter whose hands the money passed through as long as the family lived peacefully. She never imagined that the same trust would become the way others erased her name from every sacrifice she made whenever an electricity bill was paid on time. Mama Chika would take the receipt and proudly show it to relatives. "My Emeka is such a devoted son. He never lets his mother go without anything." Whenever the roof was repaired after the rainy season, she would stand outside in the yard and show it to the neighbors. "My son just sent money to fix all of it." That's how a man of the house should be. Whenever Emeka's younger sister needed money for school, Ngozi stayed awake for 3 extra nights baking snacks to deliver to a shop. While Mama Chika called relatives and said, "By the grace of God, Emeka is able to take care of his sister." Ngozi heard every word. She heard them while washing pots. She heard them while sweeping the yard. She heard them while standing behind the kitchen door with sweat running down her back. but she never stepped forward to correct the story. Not because it did not hurt, but because in that house the truth had no value if nobody wanted to hear it. A woman could use both hands to hold a family up. But if that family had already decided to call her a burden, every living piece of evidence carried on her body would be ignored. Once, when they were alone in their room, Ngozi tried speaking to Emeka. "Could you tell your mother that this month's medicine money came from me? I don't need her to thank me. I just want her to stop saying I don't contribute anything." Emeka was taking off his watch. After hearing her, he let out a breath. He did not look openly annoyed, but neither did he look sympathetic. "Ngozi, you know what my mother is like. She's old. What difference do a few words make? Besides, money between husband and wife is shared money. Why does it matter whose it is?" She looked at him for a long time, long enough to realize that he understood perfectly well. He simply did not want to change anything. "But when people praise you, you don't say it's shared money," she said quietly. Emeka was silent for a moment before replying, "Do you really want to compete with your husband?" That question ended every conversation. Because in toxic families, the person who has been hurt is often made to feel selfish simply for asking to be acknowledged. After that night, Ngozi never brought it up again. She kept transferring money, kept working, kept lowering her head before every criticism. But inside her, a small door had begun to close. Every month, she recorded everything in the old notebook, not only the money. She wrote down the dates she stayed awake all night to finish baking orders. She recorded the number of times she sold the bracelet her late mother had left her so she could pay Mama Chika's hospital bills on time. She even wrote about the afternoon. She walked nearly 5 kilometers because she had used her transport fare to buy cold medicine for Emeka. Those lines contained no resentment, no insults, no pleas for anyone to believe her. They simply existed as silent witnesses to a truth that was never allowed to have a voice. Life continued moving forward in the shape of identical days. Mama Chika still sat on the veranda telling neighbors that Ngozi was fortunate to have entered this family. The relatives still looked at her as a lucky woman who did not know how to be grateful. Emeka still allowed his mother to go too far and then told his wife not to take it personally. And Ngozi remained the one who woke up first, slept last, paid the most and received the least. She no longer hoped they would see it. She simply did what needed to be done because some part of her still believed that if she could keep this household from falling apart, perhaps one day they would understand. But the painful truth is that some people never understand sacrifice while it is still feeding them. They only recognize someone's value when they can no longer use that person. And in Mama Chika's house, that day was coming much sooner than any of them realized. They just had not yet heard its footsteps approaching. If the early years of the marriage had been marked by quiet contempt, the years that followed became a series of wounds that grew increasingly public. Mama Chika seemed to have become accustomed to Njoi's silence, and so each insult grew heavier than the one before during family gatherings. She would often point at her daughter-in-law and laugh loudly, a woman who has lived under this roof for years and still hasn't done a single thing worth mentioning. Every time she said it, a few relatives would laugh along. Not because the remark was especially funny, but because they had heard it so many times that they had come to believe it was true. Once, during the naming ceremony of a cousin's newborn baby, everyone was talking about women who knew how to build and support a family. Mama Chika deliberately turned toward Ngozi and said, "Some women are only good at spending their husband's money. As for contributing anything, nobody sees that." The entire room immediately fell silent for a few seconds. Then the awkward laughter returned. Ngozi sat there with both hands clasped together beneath the table. What hurt her was not her mother-in-law's words. What hurt her was that Emeka was sitting right beside her, hearing every word and still saying nothing. Each time it happened, another piece of her trust died. At first, she thought her husband was simply trying to keep the peace. Later, she thought perhaps he was afraid of upsetting his mother. But with time, she came to understand a truth that was even more painful. Emeka was not choosing his mother's side. He had simply never truly chosen hers. People can endure poverty for a very long time. They can endure exhausting work for a very long time. But the feeling of being abandoned by the person you love is the thing that drains the heart the fastest. Day after day, Ngozi continued working, continued contributing, continued quietly keeping the family functioning as it always had. But in her heart, she no longer considered this place home. It was simply a place where she existed. Then the final drop finally arrived on the day Mama Chika celebrated her 65th birthday. Relatives came from many different places. Neighbors were invited as well. The house was more crowded than on any other day of the year. Mama Chika wore her finest outfit and sat in the center like a queen, surrounded by praise and congratulations as the celebration was nearing its end. One relative stood and raised a glass, praising Emeka as a devoted son who had cared for his mother for many years. The entire room applauded. Mama Chika smiled proudly. But apparently that was still not enough for her. She turned toward Ngozi and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Thank God. My son works hard. If I had depended on certain other people in this house, I would have been begging on the streets long ago. Laughter echoed through the room once again. Several people even nodded in agreement. But this time, Ngozi did not lower her head. She looked around the room. She looked at the faces that had believed that false story for years. She looked at the husband who remained silent as always. Then she slowly stood up. No one knew what she was about to do. Mama Chika even curled her lips into a small smile, believing her daughter-in-law had finally felt ashamed. But instead of leaving the room, Ngozi walked toward the handbag resting in the corner of the house. When she returned, she was carrying the old notebook no one had ever paid attention to. "I want everyone to see this," she said in a voice that was strangely calm. The entire room fell silent. Mama Chika frowned. Emeka suddenly felt uneasy. Ngozi placed the notebook in the middle of the table. Page after page was opened. Date after date appeared. Amount after amount was carefully recorded. Electricity bills, water bills, medicine expenses, roof repairs, school fees for Emeka's younger sister. Hospital bills for Mama Chika herself. Beside every entry was the transfer date, the amount, and even copies of receipts neatly attached to the pages. No one in the room was laughing anymore. The same people who had just applauded Emeka began exchanging glances. One relative picked up the notebook and flipped through it more quickly. One page after another, 1 year after another. Every entry carried the same name, Ngozi. A woman they had believed was useless, a woman who had been insulted in front of relatives dozens of times. A woman who had been treated worse than an animal in her own home. Emeka's face lost all color when he realized everything had been documented. Mama Chika froze in her chair. For the first time in many years, she could not find a single word to say, because the truth was lying directly in front of her. There was no way to deny it. The person she had looked down on the most was the very person who had quietly carried the family for all those years. And in that moment, the entire story she had spent years telling everyone completely collapsed. No one in the room spoke for a very long time. This silence was completely different from the silences that had come before. In the past, silence had always stood beside Mama Chika. It had made her insults seem justified. It had helped everyone avoid facing the truth. But this time, the silence felt like a verdict. Each page lying on the table seemed to tell every story Ngozi had never spoken aloud throughout the years. The woman called useless had paid for her mother-in-law's medicine while she was hospitalized. The woman labeled a burden had paid the electricity bills, the water bills, the home repairs, and the school fees for family members. The woman treated worse than the animals in the yard was the very person who had quietly kept the house from collapsing. Mama Chica held the notebook with trembling hands. She turned several more pages, as if she still hoped to find something that would prove it was all a misunderstanding. But the more she read, the paler her face became. For the first time in many years, she was no longer the one controlling the story. The truth had taken that power away from her. One cousin set the notebook down and looked at Emeka with confusion. Another slowly shook his head. The people who had once laughed at the insults no longer dared to look directly at Ngozi. They realized they had believed a story for far too long, simply because the person telling it spoke the loudest. Emeka was the one who suffered the greatest shock. He sat motionless, staring at the numbers, the dates, and the payments he knew were all real. Not because Ngozi had just proven something, but because, for the first time, he was seeing the full weight of his wife's sacrifices laid out before him in a form that could not be denied. He remembered the nights she stayed awake working while he slept. The time she claimed she was not hungry so someone else could have the better portion of food. The time she quietly handed over money and called it a small amount of savings. He had always thought those things were insignificant. Until everything was placed side by side in a single notebook. And at that moment, he understood that the woman he had abandoned for so many years had loved this family more than anyone else in that room. Mama Chica was the first to cry. Not the tears of someone who had been wronged, they were the tears of someone who had finally seen how deeply she had been mistaken. She looked at Ngozi and said through a trembling voice, "Why didn't you tell us?" That question made several people in the room lower their heads, because they all knew the answer. Ngozi had tried, no one had wanted to listen. A person can only knock on a door so many times before they stop believing someone is still on the other side. Emeka stood up. He walked toward his wife. His voice was quieter than it had been in many years. "Ngozi, I'm sorry." Just 3 simple words, but they came far too late. He was sorry for his silence. Sorry for leaving her alone inside their own marriage. Sorry for accepting praise that belonged to her. Sorry for allowing her to suffer for so long. Mama Chica apologized as well. She said she had misunderstood. She said she had been too proud and too stubborn. She said she wanted to make everything right. The relatives who had once joined in the mockery or also began speaking. They searched for every possible way to express their regret, but some wounds no longer need explanations. Some people do not leave because of anger. They leave because their hope ran out a long time ago. Ngozi listened to everything. She did not interrupt anyone. She did not become angry. She did not bring up old wounds. She did not talk about the nights she cried alone. She did not mention the times she had been humiliated in front of others. She simply stood there with a calmness that made everyone in the room feel even more ashamed. Because when a person no longer wants to argue, it usually means they have already walked beyond the place that hurt the most. After a while, Ngozi closed the notebook. The sound was so soft that almost nobody heard it. Yet it felt like the end of many years of endurance. She looked at Emeka, she looked at Mama Chica, then she looked at the people waiting for her answer. Finally, she spoke in a calm voice. "I didn't keep this notebook to prove my value. My value has never depended on whether other people recognize it or not." The entire room fell silent. Ngozi took a slow breath and then spoke her final words. "The day all of you decided I was a burden was also the day you lost the only person who truly saw this place as family." No one could answer that statement because it contained no anger, no revenge. Yet it hurt more than any accusation ever could. A few days later, Ngozi left that house, not in tears, not after an argument. She simply gathered the things that belonged to her and walked away. For the first time in many years, she did not need anyone's permission to choose her own life. Emeka stood at the doorway watching her leave. Mama Chika sat silently in the living room. No one tried to stop her. Some people only realize someone's value when that person no longer belongs to them. But regret does not always come with the opportunity to make things right. Nguzi began a new life, a life that was more peaceful, lighter, a life where she no longer had to prove that she deserved respect. The people who remained behind had to live with the truth they had once refused to see, and that was the greatest consequence of all: not losing money. Not losing a house, but living with the memory that they had driven away the best person who had ever entered their lives. If you found this story meaningful, please subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comment section below. Your support will be the motivation to bring you many more stories in future videos.